see. But nonetheless, we got Emilio here to talk a little ball. So let's dive into a little Zach Tom talk. I've been hearing a lot of chatter here lately, Emilio, about how Zach Tom, had a bad second half of the season. He had a bad game there against Philly in the playoffs. And it's like he ended on a sour note. And maybe that's why the Packers coaching staff made that comment in terms of, basically they said he's competing for his job as well. Guys, I don't believe it for a second. Now, here's the thing, though. The people that are getting upset about that, I don't understand people getting upset that Zach Tom has to compete for his position, right? Because that was the big issue with Josh Myers forever, man, it's like they didn't bring any competition in at all.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't on one hand as Packer fans be upset when they don't bring in competition, and then as soon as they mention that Zach Tom's competing for the right tackle job, get upset about that as well. You know what I mean? So I think it was a way to just kind of look, they're in a negotiation. That's what's coming right around the bend here, right? They're going to be looking to negotiate that contract for Zach Tom, and they want to get him as cheap as they can, and Zach Tom's going to want to get as much money as he possibly can. So I think it's just kind of a starting point in terms of a negotiating factor. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You're telling me you go to buy something used, you don't kick the tires on it a couple times. I mean, you have to be willing to walk away. Obviously, in this scenario, that's not going to happen. But any good deal, we gotta try and get the number as best you can. There's always a little bit of haggling, and you always have a starting point. But I think that you do. We've also talked about it. The fact that when you bring in competition, it lights a flame under him, even if he doesn't need it. Just that little extra spark, that little extra motivation to get the best out of him, out of anyone is what we're kind of chasing after.
Yeah. Coach Lynn says, unless he's going to compete for left tackle, man, that would be a wild turn of events. And I will say this about Zach Tom. He's capable of playing all five positions on the offensive line. There's no two ways about that. What do you see as more important? Is it left tackle? Is it right tackle? I've always been taught left tackle is it's the top of the heap. That's the backside of the quarterback. If you got a righty quarterback, or the right tackle if you got a lefty like Tua, that should be your highest paid position on the offensive line. That being said, there are some offenses that I think, I don't want to say they put priority over the left tackle position, but they definitely have schemes drawn up to attack certain aspects of the defensive front, and maybe right tackle is considered a little more, at least equally valuable as left tackle. So,
and honestly, the fact that Zach Tom's not a monster dude, he's 6'4", I want to say. So he's probably on the shorter end. Jordan's like facing that way 90% of the time on his dropbacks. He's his body's faced up that way, so being able to look over him might just be something that he likes. And then you get the fridge Anthony Belton back there. You get Travis Glover out there on the edge. We'll be all right.
No, definitely. Greg in the chat said, does the chat always show on the main screen? I don't want this channel canceled from the chat being on screen. Listen, it is a feature now, and we will keep it up as long as we can. But if some knucklehead gets in here and says something stupid, we will have to drop it down. And yes, there is a risk there. So everybody help monitor it for me. All right, let's keep it in check. It doesn't mean you can't have fun in the chat, but just know you're being watched right now. Okay.
Right. If it gets into that scenario, I need to do the correct and adult decision, and we'll just go ahead and pop right there, and like we'll back to reality. So for right now, we'll say that we're on we're on good terms.
Yeah, Excelio also doubles as a hall monitor. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to, and I'm gonna try to get a couple of drops in for Tim, man, because Jacob has just been absolutely terrible at that all kind of way.
There you go. There's the first shot. All right, was Zach Tom on the verge of a significant pay increase? Let's take a look at his 2024 production. It's been widely reported that Tom struggled down the stretch last season. According to PFF, the loss to Philly is the only game he struggled in, finishing with a 56.0 offensive grade. So if you look at the grades from last year, Amelia, I don't know how well you can see it, but here were his grades week by week last year. And keep in mind, man, he tore a pec. He tore a pec in the offseason. And still pulled back from that injury.
Honestly, I forgot about that. Now that you reminded me. Him, Matt LaFleur, Tuck, right? Everybody ripped that because new strength training. And, dude, that's so true. I forgot about that.
Yeah, so here are his PFF grades throughout the 2024 season, week by week. All right. 92.0 against that Philly front in week 1. Then a 57.6 72.7, 89.0, 52.1, 88.1, 72.6, 62.3, 73.3, 73.6, 78.8, 66.7, 72.0, 83.2, 76.6, 71.3, 72.9, and then, of course, the wild card game of 56. Now, that brings, obviously, his offensive grade out to an average, or what PFF settled in at, an 85.8 was what he finished with. And Emilio, that was sixth highest amongst offensive tackles, according to PFF. So saying he had a down year and him grading out as an 85.8,
yep.
Sign me up, bro. Sign me up.
Coming off an injury, fresh off an injury, working to rehab that, and playing, against Philly, that defensive line coming in, it's not like it's an easy impact. You have to, stretch, reach, all those things. Impressive by Zach Tom, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so we move along. He finished 15th amongst tackles with an 81 pass blocking grade. All right. So when you break that down,
and like Coach said, a year removed from an ACL surgery a year prior on that left knee, I believe, right, for Tom.
Is that right? I don't even remember that. That's wild. Yeah. So if that is the case, and maybe it wasn't like a full tear, it might have just been some kind of some kind of
something. But still, man, anything on those knees, that does not feel good.
Yeah. And again, battling through that pec last year, I think it says a lot for sure. So Zach Tom finishes 15th in pass blocking grade with an 81.0. Now, keep in mind, guys, that's amongst all tackles. And you notice I didn't put any kind of minimum snap count threshold here. So you got a few guys like 821 snaps, 649 snaps, 512 snaps, 856, 719. Zach Tom had 1,134. And as we get a little deeper into some of the metrics here, you're going to see that I now adjusted the minimum snap count to like 80%, or I think it was 1,000 snaps to get kind of a true test of where he finished amongst guys that had a bunch of snaps. But nonetheless, man, finishing with an 81.0 pass blocking grade. You got to think, too, that's amongst left tackles and right tackles. So 64, the top 64, if you're in the top 64, then you are considered starting caliber offensive tackle, according to PFF. He finished 15th, which would suggest a true number one tackle on a football team, no doubt about it. So you're starting to see like everything's lining up like, okay, this guy deserves to be paid top tackle money for wherever the market's at the moment. It really does.
Right. And I like that it's not just left tackle, right tackle. You're going to put all that weight on left tackle blind side on it. But right now they are all just tackles, and he is in the top half of the top 32 tackles. Right. So that is elite from Zach Tom, and homegrown, picked him up late rounds. I mean, that's what Green Bay is as a draft and develop team. That's what we want to see.
And when you think of Zach Tom, you think of him being a great pass blocker. And I'm not saying he's not a good run blocker, but that's not the first thing I think of. I think of his footwork. I think of his hand placement, even though he's a little bit smaller stature offensive lineman. It just seems like technically he's as technically sound as any tackle in the league, right? But the reality is last year he finished third among tackles with an 87.8 run blocking grade, especially seeing that Green Bay's run blocking grades are always so bad, right, according to PFF. It's pretty wild that he finishes third with an 87.8 run blocking grade. Am I the only one that's like surprised by that, Emilio? Like, to me, last year, I remember him being good run blocking, but I don't remember him being that damn elite. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's probably not, not getting beat, being able to be on that side by yourself, not having to have Tuck over there all the time, being able to run split flow away from Zach Tom, all those things that gives you the opportunity when you have that kind of an elite player on the edge there.
Yeah, definitely. Now, another big key component to playing offensive line in the NFL is obviously controlling the penalties, and everybody looks at left tackle like that's the most important position, but also name a really, really, really good pass rusher in the NFL, Emilio. Who's the first person that comes to mind? An edge rusher.
Aiden Hutchinson right now. I mean, last year.
Where's Aiden Hutchinson line up? Left in, over the right tackle. Name another one.
Rashawn does the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Name another one.
Bosa.
You see what I'm saying?
Mack. Yeah, exactly.
TJ Watt.
Yep. You want your best edge rusher on their quote unquote worse or lesser tackle, because most teams are putting their better tackle at left tackle to protect the blind side.
Bingo. So it's pretty cool that it's another point of where the right tackle is going to be increased in value a little bit. People are going to be valuing them a little bit more. I think Myles Garrett lines up off of the left tackle side, if I remember correctly. But I feel really comfortable saying at least 75, maybe 80% of the top edge rushers in the game rush over the right tackle off of the defensive side. So, yeah, pretty important. So, anyway, penalties, right? Penalties, controlling penalties. Among tackles with 1,000 snaps. So, I thought to get a true test here, let's pull out all the tackles who had 1,000+ snaps, right? And he ended up finishing 9th with only 7 penalties last year. So he finishes the year, and it's kind of hard to see here on this list. He finished with 1,134 offensive snaps, okay? And he only had 7 penalties last year, which was tied for 9th least in the league. Another thing, you just check the box. Because, I mean, you could look at the grades and go, man, this guy can run block, he can pass block. He's a little undisciplined, but still you're going to pay him top dollar. When you see that he's top 10 in least amount of penalties too, man. Like, how can you not pay this guy?
Yeah, because I was screaming about it. The penalties were the problem. Rashid got like 3 in a game, I think, that first or second week. And I was just stressing because, I mean, that's just setting your offense back. So you have someone that's elite at pass and run blocking. You have somebody that isn't taking a lot of penalties and is keeping your quarterback upright and clean. I mean, that's an anchor on the wall. That's what we've talked about. We wanna build that wall in front of Jordan Love. And I think Zach Tom, no matter where we put him, is that anchor right now. Right tackle is killer. Let him be an all-pro. Let him be Pro Bowl. Let him just run it. If he wants to move, maybe, if that's something, hey, coach, it's not working for me out there. I'll do anything you want for the team. But maybe I really do want to play center. Maybe really do want to play left tackle. Then, all right, fine. Let's go. You can go and compete at that position. But why, it's not broke. We don't need to fix it up right now.
Yeah. Greg Rice says, was 24 an all-pro year for Tom? It was not. I think he finished 3rd. I think he was 3rd in right tackle all-pro voting, if I remember correctly. I've heard several people say that now, so I feel pretty confident that's where he finished. So just to answer that question on the fly here. Among tackles with 1,000 snaps, he finished 13th in the league with only 4 sacks allowed. All year long, over 1,134 snaps, he only allowed 4 sacks last year. And what's crazy is look who's tied for 10th on that list, Rasheed Walker. Rasheed Walker only allowed 3 sacks last year. So I don't know, man. I've kind of written it off that we're not going to pay Rasheed Walker, but
it could surprise us. They absolutely could. And just say, hey, no, we got a deal done. The problem is, I think Rasheed coming in from, he was supposed to be a high draft pick, dropped all the way to the 7th round. You don't think he's going to want to go get his money? I mean,
right.
A left tackle that performs like that, I would say 75% of the NFL is taking him in a heartbeat. If they need somebody that can pass block and they're fine with their run block and we can bring a tight end, whatever, Rasheed's going to get his money, I think.
And most media members are talking as if they're not even going to offer him a contract. I think that's just crazy. Like, at least offer him a contract. He may take it. Yeah, I mean, and that's what I want to ask. And I know we're talking Tom, but since we're on the subject here, let's just steer in the opposite direction for a second. Rasheed Walker, what's the number you come up with that you go, I'd be willing to pay him that average annual value on a 3 to 4 year deal? What would that number be?
Man,
it's tough, right? Like, I immediately think 10 million. I'd be willing to pay him 10 million. That's chump change for a solid left tackle. He's
seriously.
Probably
I was honestly thinking it'd be anywhere from 15 to 25 as like a number for him. And I would need to be on that low end. I mean, 10 to 15 would be, I wouldn't be mad at that if they pulled the trigger. But again, then if you brought in all this talent, Jordan Morgan, Belton, if you have all those guys planned out, hey, if they're going to be the guys, so be it. But I guess you could always look at it as, hey, we did draft Rasheed. We are developing him. Right. And then it's either, all right, you turn a profit from that, you built up that car and then sold it for extra money, or all right, I'm going to keep it and enjoy this ride. And then, maybe later on we'll move on from it.
Yeah. Chris the Casual In says 18 million. I can't argue with that. I'm sitting back going, all right, you can't pay everybody though, right? So maybe it's something you go into the process and you go, okay, let's prioritize here, right? Zach Tom, top of the priority list for me. Let's get his deal done, right? And we'll talk about where his value is. Spoiler alert: it's about 21 million, is what Spotrac saying. Doesn't mean they're correct, but that's though they show the evaluation. We hit on it before. We'll hit on it again. But like someone points out here in the chat, let me mark that one. I'll come back to it. Here we go. Greg Rice, is that a 53% run block grade? So yeah, I think he's talking about Rasheed Walker. That is correct. That's his weak spot, right? Is run blocking. There's no two ways about it. So you also went and drafted Anthony Belton, right? You've got Jordan Morgan, who played left tackle his whole career through high school and college, and then switched to right guard last year for the Packers. So you've got some options there as well. The signing of Aaron Banks would suggest you're wanting to go with a little bit more of a mauler type offensive line, which would press into run blocking, right? So there's a lot of validity to what Greg Rice is asking there, in terms of, is that a 53% run block rate? So given that, what would the number be, Greg? You give us your number real quick, man.
And to the point of Rasheed, I mean, look at some of these pass blocking, run blocking numbers here. I mean, Andrew Wiley, number one, his pass blocking, 671 snaps to 442 on run blocking. Tristan Wirfs, 664 to 397. Penei Sewell, even 664 to 548. Lane Johnson, Philly's the only one opposite, which we're close to, but Lane Johnson was 616 run blocking, 574 pass. And you're looking at Zach Tom and Rasheed. Both of those are at 536 run blocking, 603 pass. Imagine Rasheed getting to a Tampa Bay or a Denver over here, or Houston ran 745 pass plays last year. Like, you're telling me they wouldn't want a tackle that is proficient in pass blocking, that's doing it 2/3 of the time?
Right. Exactly. Someone asked a question in here about second-year contracts. Here we go. Ron Sample, which starting left tackles make $10 million or less on the second contract? That's a great question. If I pull up Spotrac, I'm not going to put it on the screen, but I am going to just pull up tackles real quick. And I don't know who's on a second-year contract, but the cap hit. Let's go average annual value if I can here. Contract average, I think, is what we're looking for. Okay, so here are the left tackles. Tristan Wirfs, number one at 28.1. Penei Sewell, 28. Trent Williams, 27.5. Christian Darrisaw, 26. Lane Johnson, 25. Jeremy Tunzel, 25. Andrew Thomas, 23.5. Trey Smith, 23.4. Jake Matthews, 22.5. Jordan Mailata, 22. I mean, you got to get down to the 16th. Actually, lower than that, probably closer to the that'd be 16, 17, 18, 19, around the 20 spot that you say, okay, that dude is under $20 million average annual value. You know what I'm saying? So actually, that was offensive line in general too. If you go to tackle, it's right around the 15 mark is when you get under 20 million. So I'm trying to look like Brian O'Neill, maybe in Minnesota, 18.5, maybe that's around that number, which is what Chris Enns said. That'd be around the spot, So.
And I just feel like it's still going up. I feel like that number is not going to be 18.5 might be that bare minimum point. I think honestly Rasheed's asking for at least 20. If you performed like that, I feel like you could probably get away with asking for 20.
Yeah, I could see that. Rock Cod earlier said right tackles all pro voting. Penei Sewell with Detroit got 119. I guess that was 35 first place votes, maybe.
Yep.
Lane Johnson finished with 76 and 15 first place votes. Then Zach Tom finished third with 3 votes. So there you go. And then Brian O'Neill right there, right behind him. So if you're saying Brian O'Neill isn't as good as Zach Tom, and we just seen Brian O'Neill's numbers at 18.5, that 21 we talked about is right on the money, I believe. I think it's right there in there.
And look at that right tackle. I mean, the all-pro voting, 3 of those are NFC North teams. You got the Detroit. So then you're looking at, all right, what are you building defensive wise to beat those 3 all-pro players? Because you're in your division, you're playing them, 6 times a year. So it's like that's something you really got to keep in mind while you're roster building.
Yeah, definitely. And then Rock Cod went on to say left guards all pro voting: Joe Tooney of Kansas City with 129, Quentin Nelson with 43, Landon Dickerson with 18, then Elton Jenkins just missing out there. He had 10 votes. So there you go. Big E. I'm excited about him moving to center. We just got to get that contract reworked.
Yep.
Got to get that done. So thank you for that information, Deadfish. We appreciate you, buddy.
Do you think you'd be happy we get all our our O-line squared away? We know what's going to happen with Rashid. We get Elton paid, and then we get Tom paid. I mean, that offensive line is set for 3 years. 3 years. I mean, with Jordan Morgan rolling in, and you can figure out what's going on with Sean Ryan, but you have a lot of depth. You have 2 solid guys that are getting paid that are going to be there forever, and we can kind of go with whatever we have in the future.
Yeah, to me, it comes down to precedent, right? You got to look at your current cap situation and precedent, and the Packers have only paid 2 at a time, I believe. You might get one year rollover with a third player or something, and then they're kind of gone, and then they recoup, reset. Like, I'm trying to think, when David Bakhtiari was getting paid darn good money, who else was getting paid? Elton, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So other than Elton, who else was getting paid? I can't think of anyone. Before that, before Bach kind of became the highest paid, I think back to the Chad Clifton days way back when, right? And then you had, Mark Tauscher was on the roster as well. You draft Bulaga and you draft David Bakhtiari. Well, you ended up paying Bulaga and letting, if I'm remembering correctly, they tried Bulaga at left tackle. He couldn't play guard. They tried him at left tackle. He didn't fit there. They put him at right tackle. David Bakhtiari stepped right in, and they were off and running. And then Bulaga took Mark Tauscher's spot, so both those contracts come off the books, and you're back to paying 2.
Yeah.
And if you remember, Josh Sitton came on the scene. Bulaga leaves, if I remember right. I think I'm remembering this correctly. Maybe Sitton came right before or was gone right before Bulaga left. But nonetheless, it just always feels like there's 2 to 3, but most of the time 2 that are getting paid really good money. So,
and I feel like that's how you got to do it. You got to pay. You always got to pay your quarterback. You got to have a couple staples on the offense. You're gonna have to pay a skill player at some point. You have to pay your DNs. I mean, there's not enough money to pay everybody. Top $10.
Right. Up next, among tackles with 1,000 snaps, he finished 11th in pressures allowed. He allowed 28 pressures last year, so he's borderline top 10 with tackles over 1,000 snaps. So another perfect example. There you see Brian O'Neill right above him with, what was it, 1 less pressure. And, he's only 2 away from being in the top 5, though. So that is worth mentioning there, right? So 3 away from being in the top 5. So, again, sacks checks the box, pass blocking checks the box, run blocking checks the box. Talking about grades-wise. Yep. Penalties, you check the box. You see what I'm saying here? Like, I was trying to find, okay, why would they be hesitant? There's truly nothing here, man. Among tackles with 1,000 snaps, he finished 7th in allowing only 2 quarterback hits. So there you got him almost climbing into the top 5.
The best guy around.
That. All right, so I went on to say Spot Track has Zach Tom's fair market value set at $21.7 million average annual value, given he finished averages out to a top 10 performing offensive tackle in important metrics. That seems to be very team-friendly deal and would provide a cornerstone for Jordan Love on the offensive line. So if I drop this down real quick, and we're going to continue this conversation for just a second longer, I want to pop over the Spot Track site real quick and show you guys what we're talking about with the tackle money. All right, so when you look at the average annual value of this tackle money, if we're saying he's truly top 10, let's start there, right? Dan Moore, 20.5. Jordan Mailata, 22. Jake Matthews, 22.5. So 21 does seem a little team-friendly because the newer the deal, the higher it's going to be on this list. I'm not saying it's going to be top 3 or top 5, but it does. I wouldn't be surprised if it reaches the 25 million mark.
And again, the top 4 are 2 NFC North tackles getting paid top dollar. Yep. So it's like to keep up with our division, you have to have strong tackles. You got to have a strong D-line. I feel like that's kind of what – I feel like there's just a pattern coming around. You kind of see something that keeps appearing. We got to do something with our tackles. We got to make sure that we're solid on our end too.
Yep, no doubt about it. All right, anything else you want to add to the offensive line / Zach Tom conversation there.
No, I think 20. If we can get him around 20, we'll be happy as long as we don't fly over 25. No 30 talk here. I love Zach Tom, but and then again, like we were talking earlier, you're kicking the tire a little bit. Hey, Zach, I mean, I can only get like 17.5, out of the bank account. I mean, I'm sorry, man. I don't know. Mark didn't leave us the keys when he left, and like we're trying to figure that out. So that's the kind of the battle. You don't want to get him upset, but let's get him paid so that everyone's head focused on football by the time we get there.
And honestly, Zach Tom comes across to me like he wouldn't get upset.
No, I don't think so.
When they did their locker clean out and Jason Wilde played an audio of them, kind of talking to him at the end of the season last year, one thing that stood out to me was like, he was like, yeah, I battled through an injury. And he waited till, like Tauscher pointed out, he waited till the end of the year, the season's over, before he even mentioned it. He didn't use it as an excuse all year long. Still played damn good football.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a locker clean out, he was like, hey, I didn't play my best football this year.
And that's where you might get a brownie point with Goody and the stat. Hey, we love that you just put your head down and worked. You didn't complain. I knew you were hurt. You kept battling. Like maybe we'll give you a couple bones because of that.
Right. And I think the other thing too, you can lower that average annual value if you guarantee more money. Now we know the Packers don't necessarily operate like that. They'll play kind of hardball, I hope they don't. If they piss him off, there's something wrong, because to me, he seems like he's going to be the last person that's going to get easily ticked off that the organization is lowballing him. So if he, if they come in at 12 million, he's liable to say stuff it, and I don't blame him one bit. But yeah.
Yeah, Rock Cod over here asking, could they sign him to a 5-year, $100 million for now so he gets his money before this year starts? Give him 75, 70 guaranteed if you do something like that? I feel like you'd have to guarantee a lot of it if you're going to keep him on the edge of that 20. Would be my only worry.
I would think so too. The more guaranteed money you can offer, then the overall number is going to go down. Right now, if he's talking about getting his money this year before the year starts, the Packers typically, when they do a contract negotiation, the way it typically works is the first year that the contract kicks in, they like to pay the money up front, the guaranteed money up front. That way, let's say it's a 4-year deal. You guys always hear me say if it's a 4-year deal, it's really a 3-year deal. If it's a 3-year deal, it's really a 2-year deal, because they pay a ton of money up front, right, in signing bonus, get that out of the way. And then on the back side of the contract, you've got less dead cap, where if for some reason things go awry, you can move on from the contract a little bit easier. So in terms of that, Rock Cod, he's going to get a chunk of money as a signing bonus, no doubt about it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
If that answers your question there, but and when you do that, typically the first year they may pull a little bit of cap into this year and absorb a little bit of hit, but the first year that the contract kicks in, it's not that bad. It's typically the second year that, with the way the Packers structure, you go, oh crap, that jumped up quick, like Aaron Banks is next year, right? But when you get to that point, if you are in a little bit of a salary cap situation, that's where you can go cash over cap, start converting base salary to signing bonus and tack on a couple voidable years, make it a little more palatable at the moment. And then by the time that contract is up, if you decide to move on, it's not like it just completely flips the card upside down. It's saving, $3 to $5 million here and there. That really adds up. So